What's going on, YouTube? My name is Mason, and if you're watching this video, I'm guessing you're probably having some problems with oil leaks on your 6.7 Powerstroke. So I made a video for you guys a while back about what to check first whenever you have an oil leak on your 6.7 liter Powerstroke. And what I talked about, for the most part, was the crankcase filter. And the crankcase filter usually is the main cause of an oil leak on these 6.7 engines. But sometimes, even if it was the crankcase filter causing the leak, it may still leak after you replace the crankcase filter, because if it blew the silicone or the gasket out around the oil pan, even replacing the crankcase filter isn't going to completely solve your problem. So I want to talk a little bit about where these motors usually leak oil from. They usually leak from on the driver's side where the oil pan, front cover, and block meet. It's like a T there that they meet, and it almost always is leaking right there. I'd say 99 times out of 100, if one of them has an oil leak, that's where it's leaking from. So I shot a little bit of footage of one I had come in today that had a little bit of an oil leak. Now, when I say a little bit, I had very, very little. It wouldn't even be something that you would notice dripping on the ground. But I went ahead and took some video of that I'll put over here. And I also took a video of what the crankcase pressure looked like. So as you notice when you watch this video, once I took the oil cap off, there wasn't, like in my previous video, if you haven't watched that, go check it out, by the way. The previous video, it just shot the cap right off, like almost into the hood. This one didn't. It didn't have a whole lot of crankcase pressure. You could see some there. And I would say that crankcase pressure is causing this little bit of oil leak. And the problem with that is, even though it's so small, you wouldn't even really notice it. 20 or 30 or 40,000 miles down the road, it's going to become bigger and bigger and bigger, especially if you don't change that crankcase filter. It's just going to get more and more clogged. So Ford actually has put out a special service message. The number for the special service message is 49039, SSM 49039. So what they say in the special service message is basically that any oil leak on the engine could be caused by a clogged or partially restricted crankcase filter, which is exactly what I showed y'all in my last video. But this service message, it doesn't really give you any kind of diagnostic procedure to do to try to fix or solve. All it says is all it's basically saying to you is check your crankcase filter before you go start making repairs for oil leaks. If an oil leak's bad enough, and I know I just talked about this, if an oil leak's bad enough, the crankcase filter won't solve it. The crankcase filter will slow it down, but it won't solve it. It'll still be leaking after you replace that crankcase filter. So in that case, generally what you have to do is you have to reseal the upper oil pan. And a lot of people are going to tell you don't have to do this, but it is very important that you do, is reseal the front cover, which is a very, very in-depth thing. The transmission's got to come off, the flex plate's got to come off, the whole front shroud, all that's got to come off to get to the front cover. It's a pretty in-depth repair. But what I've seen is, if you don't reseal that front cover, if you just reseal the upper oil pan, it will continue to leak down the road. It might take it a while to start back, but you're going to have more and more problems with it. So the type of silicone that Ford recommends you use is Motorcraft TA357. I'll put a link to that down in the description if you want to go check it out, go see how much it costs, you know, what it's really all about. But it is some of the strongest holding, bonding silicone I've ever seen. Every time I've tried to pry something off that was put on with it, every time I think I have bolts still stuck in it, because it's so tight. When it seals, it's just so tight. Even though it's so tight, I still haven't found with it that it does any better for, preventing leaks down the road than like an older gray or gray silicone, just some kind of generic gray Permatex silicone that you would get from the parts house. I haven't seen it do any better down the stretch. I still see it leaking just as much as the old silicone does. So something to think about there. I know these upper pans are almost identical from 2011 all the way up to 2020, up to the newest model years. The difference you'll find is if you have a 2011 to 2014, and when I say 2014, I mean the early build 2014s, not the late builds. It was a split year that year. 2011 to 2014, you're actually going to have a press-in gasket on your upper oil pan, which is 100 times easier to deal with because you don't have to clean it. It's just you pull it in, put a new one on, and slap it back in. It makes that process a whole lot easier. 2014 late model all the way up are all sealed from the factory with silicone. You cannot put a press-in gasket in, which really sucks because the process of cleaning that silicone that I'm talking about off is so aggravating. I know sometimes I've just replaced the entire upper oil pan to keep from having to clean it because maybe I'm doing it behind somebody and there's just a ton of silicone all over it and you just can't get it all off. So I've already talked about where the oil leak are coming from on these 6.7s. I know if you own one, you've probably dealt with an oil leak already. Hopefully it was still in warranty when it happened. I've talked about the crankcase filter, about how to replace it in the last video, about what it looks like when you take your oil cap off, how much pressure it has. I've showed you where the oil leak's coming from on this. Something I hadn't talked about is the service interval on the crankcase filters, and I've never really known exactly what that was, so I went and looked it up a while ago. Ford actually recommends you replace that crankcase filter every 100,000 miles, which is, in my opinion, is a very, very long time. If it was my truck, I would replace it every 50,000, just because of if it does clog up and causes an oil leak, you're talking about the reseal an upper oil pan and front cover. I mean, you're talking about almost a $3,000 repair if you're out of warranty. I mean, that's a lot of money to spend just to solve an oil leak that could have been prevented in the first place by a $75 to $100 filter. I don't remember the exact price on them, but it just seems like a real small price to pay to keep from having oil leaks develop on these. Now, last video I talked about the 2011 to 2016 models, how they had the full-on crate case separator, like you can't take it apart and put a filter in it. On those, I would actually just periodically check it instead of just replacing the filter every 50,000. I would just periodically check my pressure by pulling that oil cap off and seeing, because those are they're not like a service interval type thing. Those are meant to be on there for the life of the vehicle. Although they do clog up a lot. I see a lot of those clog up just like I do on the 17, 18, 19, 20s. So I really hope me talking about some of this stuff with you guys might help you with some of your own projects and what's going on with your vehicles. If your vehicle is still within that 100,000 mile diesel engine warranty, I would really recommend you take it to a Ford dealership because it will be paid for. I know if you haven't went and checked out my last video on the crankcase filter about how to replace it, I do some more talking about what it is and show you some pictures of it, show you some video of it. Definitely go check that one out. That'll really make this one make a lot more sense. But I just know though in the last video I didn't talk about where the oil leaks really come from, where you see them the most, and you know some prices on how much it would cost to replace some of these things, how difficult it is to replace some of them. So I really hope me just sitting here talking with you guys really helped you have a better understanding of what's going on with the crankcase filter and the oil leak problems that these 6.7s have. So I really appreciate you guys watching. If you like the video, give me that thumbs up. That really helps, and it helps motivate me to keep making videos. And if you enjoy the content that the stuff I'm talking about in this video, I think if you subscribe to the channel, you'll find a lot of useful information. I try to put up at least one video a week. So if you have a F-250, or even if you have a Ford vehicle or any kind of vehicle, I try to mix it up and not just do Ford, although that is what I'm work on the most. So yeah, if you liked what you've seen here, then definitely go check that out. Subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out. Peace out, YouTube.